To the Point with Michael Williams.
Heading into the rainy season soon, what is that going to mean for Lake Okeechobee, algae, and the new goal of trying to keep the lake at lower levels before the summer arrives, plus cleaning up the effort to improve our beaches and parks and how you can help, how all of us can help. Good morning and welcome. For those of you celebrating Easter, we wish you a happy Easter. Today, we have a special Protecting Paradise edition of To the Point. Earth Day tomorrow, so we're devoting our entire broadcast to environmental issues, and we'll be talking about what you can do to help our area. Joining me now, John Maehl, Ecosystem Restoration Manager in Martin County. Thank you very much for coming in. We much appreciate you being here. Last year we had a state of emergency, the algae crisis. Then and now, where are we? How have we recovered from that, if we have it all? And give us a state of play in Martin County environmentally, especially as it relates to algae.
Certainly. So we're in much better condition coming into this rainy season than we were last rainy season. For instance, the lake level this morning is about 11.5 feet. It was about a couple feet higher or more this time last year, and before we got those 28 inches of rain that really brought lake levels up and forced the discharge scenario. So we feel like we're better poised. However, we know that the lake is going to have algae blooms, and we know that every rainy season brings with it the possibility of high lake levels, which would require more discharges.
Now, the Army had lowered the lake level to about 11.5 feet normally. If there's a normal at times, it can vary year to year, between 12.5 and 15 feet. The idea, by eliminating a lot of the water now, you eliminate perhaps the level of the problem we had last year. You feel good about that, because we're going to get into the piece where a lot of people are concerned we're going too far, and you've got the constant debate between coastal residents and the understandable concerns people who live and work around the lake. But your first take on where the lake is now and whether it's too low to guard against, let's say we have an extended drought.
So yeah, we feel good about it.
We're not predicting that, but we're talking about possibilities.
Certainly, yeah, when nobody has a crystal ball.
No.
So you take the best available information and make those decisions. Last year, the situation in the winter months was the National Weather Service was forecasting a drought, and so the operation was intended to try and conserve water, and it turned out that it was more a drought than a wet season, but we had that anomaly of so much rain in the spring, so you never really know. However, the lake's management currently falls within the lake regulation schedule, and the intention is really geared towards lake health. The estuary, or the lake ecologists that are most familiar with Lake O are all suggesting that an 11-foot lake level before the rainy season would allow for a regeneration of the aquatic vegetation.
More sunlight reaching the vegetation.
Yeah.
And I've talked to them about that, because we tend to sometimes do these one-size-fits-all for lake levels. And the fact of the matter is, work's speeding along, at least relative to where it's been the last decade or so, on dike repairs. But even when done on schedule, if it's done on schedule in 2022, that's not a panacea for suddenly holding more water in the lake, because of lake concerns for recreational fishermen, for ongoing concerns even after dike repairs for community around the lake about safety. So it's this yin and yang. How do we ever come to a happy medium, if there's such a thing, as it regards lake levels, even when the dike presumably is finished being repaired in 3 more years?
Yeah, you're correct. There is no silver bullet, and no one thing is going to fix this for everyone. It really is a holistic effort, and everyone needs to be engaged in sharing their concerns. There's some, our impression is that the Corps of Engineers does a very good job of balancing all those needs. We have a call every week where the public's invited to join. It's intended that scientists get on Tuesday afternoons, and we talk about the different factors, what's going on with everyone's different interests.
And another key here is to finish work on the reservoirs, including the one in northwestern Martin County. When's that scheduled to be done? Because then it eliminates this need where you're either dumping a lot of water that you needed to save, or you don't have enough. And this has been a problem. Of course, that also is the debate, to clean up the Everglades south, but send water south to a reservoir, so if it's needed, but also to cleanse the Everglades. So we keep talking about these projects. We think we can see the reservoir, C-44.
C-44, correct.
In northwestern Martin County. When's completion date? How much will that help?
It's going to be significant, Michael. It's scheduled to be done. The STA will be done early next year, and they're going to start operating the STA in some capacity prior to the reservoir component even being complete, and that's due to be done in early 2021, and they'll start filling it as a test even before that, so it'll start to make a difference. There's really only two things that we can do to help with this issue. One of them is capacity, which things like the C44, the C43, the EAA reservoir, those are capacity, and also treatment, water quality treatment components. But the other thing that we need to keep focused on is improving stormwater drainage. So if we can treat water where it falls or store it, recharge the aquifer, then you don't have to deal with it in a capacity issue later.
Let's talk about treatment issues. I want to talk generally at first. I talked to an environmentalist once. He said, we have regulations that we don't enforce in terms of runoff. And if we could do more with farm and ag runoff, with water coming into the lake from the north, and also septic, which we'll talk about. He said, it's such a big piece of the puzzle. And he said, a lot of people are getting away with not using best practices generally. Do you agree with that assessment? Do we have rules on the book that aren't being enforced, or do we need a lot more new rules on the book for runoff, for pollution coming into these water systems? Which is it, or a bit of both?
So Michael, there's as many opinions about that as there are people talking about it. My take on it is, I think there's been some decent attempts to create best management practices. I think people have done the best that they can with those rules, and my impression is that for the most part, there's no people out there that are just intentionally trying to impact the stormwater in a bad way. We all live in it. You and I have houses and driveways, and so we all really need to be a part of treating stormwater as a resource rather than a waste to get rid of.
And to that point, the pollution sources that create the nutrients, that create the algal blooms, you can blame that on issues around the lake, but many also say our coastal communities, certainly with the fertilizer runoff, we'll talk about that. Martin County had a fertilizer ban last summer. Do you see it happening again this year? How much does that matter in terms of keeping runoff from fertilizer feeding and supercharging the algal blooms?
Certainly.
And will we see it again this summer, that ban?
Absolutely. So that's an ordinance that's standing.
In Martin County?
Yeah. Most counties will have something like that, and ours is pretty typical of the counties that are on the Indian River Lagoon. So that starts up soon, and it's, we don't want residents to put phosphorus down. There's no need for it. We'd like them to reduce watering to the minimum and not have excess watering, and nitrogen should be 50% slow release. That's not a silver bullet either. Again, there's all these things are pieces of the puzzle that, everywhere we can try to reduce nutrients and pollutants, but that's just another way to do it.
One of the problems, septic tanks leaking into the water. How big a problem ongoing? We've covered it a lot. And how expensive is it going to be? A lot of people have complained this conversion to sewer systems. Some people say we just don't have the money, yet others argue it has to be a vital component. So where do we stand with that, where the issue stands now and the conversion?
So the septic issue is a hotly debated issue. Nobody really knows the exact contributions of nutrients versus fertilizer or biosolid land application. However, it's a piece of it. We know that there's a nitrogen component to septics, especially septics that are old or maybe don't have the capacity to meet the need. So why not address those? And in Martin County, we're well poised to address that issue, and so we feel like we should. And the board has just committed $4 million a year to start a plan of reducing our septics, our failing septic system from 10,000 to 0 in the next 10 years.
And helping people finance that who say that's a big bill for me. What do you say to the person at home in Martin County? And this is an issue not just in Martin County, by the way. In all 5 counties we look at this. We happen to be focusing there, but wherever you sit in our region, these are the kind of issues we have to talk about. How do you help people's pocketbook? They'll say, I'd like to help, but gee.
So our board is very interested in helping, and they're kind of patterning their effort after what happened in the Florida Keys. They identified a need to get off of septic entirely, and they did it, and they saw fantastic results. But they were able to keep the cost down to about $8,000 per connection by offsetting with grants, with
grants that can help
funding,
people defer the cost.
And then there's also programs where if you connect early, that they'll discount it. The county has also packaged up some of the process so that it's easy for a homeowner to make that connection.
A couple of broader questions in our remaining minutes. South Florida Water Management, major changes, new board members. Do you see a difference in the way they're working? How are you getting along with them? What are your conversations like?
It's pretty exciting. We're getting along quite well with them. And of course, we have a representative, Jackie Thorlipish from Martin County, who's on the governing board. And last meeting, last Thursday, would be Yeah, last week. That really demonstrated a dynamic shift in the paradigm.
How? In plain English, how?
So the questions that they ask, they're really coming to it with a blank slate and saying, okay, what is the system and what are the constraints and what are some things we can do? And it's really created some interesting conversations about the future of water management in South Florida.
That you think will allow you a broader palette upon which to paint particular solutions and the way to fund those and get those to fruition?
I believe we have broader interest in how we manage, and I think they're going to take a more broad interest in the stakeholders.
Let's go 50,000. You've already gone 50,000 foot level with that. Let's go to the 100,000 foot level. Many have given Governor DeSantis broad, good marks for early remarks and, moreover, action on water, proposing several $100 million for water restoration, Everglades restoration, for help with the kind of things we talk in Martin County. Give sort of your summary overview of where we stand with the ecosystem in Martin County. If you were to give it a grade, where we go, what we're doing particularly, what we need to do. Give us a sense of that.
Certainly. So one of the great things about Martin County, and it makes me proud to be a part of it, is the land acquisition efforts that they've embarked on for the last 20 years. And what that means is that land is always a part of natural area storage and treatment for water quality. It'll never become something else. And so when we fast forward 50 years and we look at population growth trends, that land stays in that current condition, and so it mitigates
part of a cleaner watershed when it does.
It certainly does. It's the most important part of a clean watershed. That doesn't cost anything to treat that water. It does it naturally and mimics the natural system.
Anything else with the money the governor's talking about? We're waiting to see what lawmakers ultimately sign off on before we head to July 1st and everything's done and over with the new budget. But anything near term you're looking at that you can leave us with?
So certainly, we're most interested in the septic to sewer funding program, and we've gone all in with that. It's our top priority because that's something we can do in our backyard. But we know that the governor and the legislature have showed a lot of interest in funding Everglades restoration projects, and that's part of the long-term solution, so we're excited about that as well.
And a continuing discussion both with the board and with interest in the community. And really, are you sensing broader discussions? For too long it's been sort of the coastal debate, interior lake debate. Are we breaking down those barriers and understanding that everybody has livelihoods, interest, environmental and economic concerns? Absolutely. Is it a better discussion now instead of everybody bristling at one another?
I think that the Lake Okeechobee schedule
water release schedules.
That kind of stirred up a little bit of tension, but I think when we all sit down at the table and talk, we know we have shared interests. Water quality in Lake Okeechobee is good for all of us. And so if we can get some aquatic vegetation renewal in there, that's good for every stakeholder. And so I think we can agree on that. And I think we can agree that water quality in general is good for all stakeholders. And so if we come around that as a rallying cry, I think we'll be well poised for the future.
Big topic to wrap our arms around, but we appreciate you helping us with that, and I'd love to have you back on the broadcast. No more important topic than our environmental stewardship, so thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael.
And coming up next, the ways you can help the environment in our area. Next Saturday, the Great American Cleanup, and WPTV will have teams joining in the cleanup at some of the parks in our area. One of those coordinating the cleanups, Lourdes Ferris, Executive Director of Keep Palm Beach County Beautiful. We thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
We know you're planning big things for the Great American Cleanup April 27th. Give us an overview of what we can expect.
Well, we do this event every year. Close to Earth Day as possible. Earth Day is tomorrow, and so we celebrate that day, but we want to make these initiatives an everyday occurrence with people. But the Great American Cleanup is an event where we have volunteers come out and they do a range of projects that go from cleaning up beaches to roadways to neighborhoods, and doing other beautification projects such as landscape projects or even painting projects, just everyday projects to beautify the community and make the environment better.
And we've seen over the years one of the many nice things about it, above and beyond obviously the cleanup, is all ages. Everybody really pitches in, young and old alike. You see people really coming from around the community understanding it's a treasure that we need to take care of and clean up. Talk a little bit more about that.
Right, we, Florida is our home, but many people call it a paradise. And paradise, it's a paradise we have to take care of. It's very environmentally sensitive, and so it takes all of us to contribute to conserving and preserving it. So this is a very much not only a cleanup and beautification event, but also an educational event where families are involved, that bring their children, you know, some as young as toddlers with them. And I think it, you know, just bringing your children with you makes a great impact on our youth, because they're the future environmentalist, you know, in our community.
As we're looking at pictures now, you see the need for the cleanup with so much litter, which drives me nuts. I mean, the way we really trash our community. Back up a little bit, talk about the scope of the problem we face, which creates this need. It's wonderful to see us come together, but give us a sense of the scope of the problem, what it portends, what it means for us when we are trashing and choking our community on garbage, litter, pollution, and also things which aren't directly related to your cleanup, but when we're dumping chemicals in backyards. I mean, it's a huge scope of a problem.
Yes, it definitely is, and these are the focus areas of Keep Palm Beach County Beautiful. So let me start with litter first as one of the focus areas. We all know we were raised not to be litter bugs and not litter, and most of us are good about that. We don't throw things out of our car or anything like that. But there's several issues. There are things in our everyday lives that we now have to change. For example, let me give you the balloons, for example. We buy balloons for our birthday parties. You know, we buy balloons for memorials, and in many cases we put them outside. Some of them, because they're escape artists, get released and they fly away. And other times we release them in memorials. And balloons have become all of a sudden an issue with litter. They don't go up in the sky and disappear. They come down and they become pieces of litter that entangle wildlife.
So how do we, as we look at balloons and other non-biodegradable objects, with the scope and reach and muscularity of your organization, how much are you involved in the push that we're beginning to see nationwide on either banning things like that, like plastic straws, but more the biodegradability push on packaging and the items we use?
We try to do a lot of education on that, and I think a lot of it is personal responsibility. We don't want to ban balloons. We just want you to be careful about where you use them. It's against the law in Florida to release 10 or more balloons. There's fines involved. But if you're a realtor, for example, and you're doing an open house, how about considering something else other than balloons to call attention to that particular, you know, to the open house? Because those balloons may fly away in a very breezy day and cause issues. Speak
beyond that to the broader issue about litter, biodegradability, cleanup, what we all need to do, not just when we have a big day for cleanup, but what we all need to be doing every day.
I think we need to reduce, and this is another issue, very important issue, is waste reduction. And using a lot less single-use items in our lives, and particularly plastics, because they become a problem. They don't biodegrade easily, and when they do biodegrade, they biodegrade into little bits of microplastics that enter the food chain and become very dangerous, not only for marine life, but for us, you know, down the food chain.
Let's talk a little bit. I want to end on a high note here, ahead of the cleanup. You also, above and beyond this day, you do a lot of work with schools, and really the leaders are going to help get us there. I always say, are the youngsters of today who are growing up and hopefully with a lot more environmental awareness than, frankly, perhaps many in our generation have had, at least to date. Talk about your work with schools, where you are with that, and what you're doing really year-round.
Well, we're trying to help schools with things that we have a lot of different organizations in Palm Beach County, wonderful organizations, because it takes a village to handle these problems, right? So we try to get into things that aren't being done by other organizations. So for example, one thing we're doing is we're trying to retrofit schools with drinking fountains that have reusable bottle refill stations as part of them. And it's become such an issue that all new construction in schools now are going to have these drinking fountains. So we're trying to retrofit some of the older schools with that, and teaching the kids not to necessarily have to bring so many single-use water bottles to school, but to bring a good reusable bottle and fill it up at the drinking fountain.
In our closing seconds, if I was going to sum up the conversation, it's really about mindset and involvement,
Yes.
awareness. That's
An
the bottom line.
individual responsibility to think about your impact on your community's environment and what you can do to make it a better place and not have such a negative impact on it. Because again, we're going back to the environmental, Florida is a very environmentally sensitive state. And it's got a lot of pressures on it from development and people wanting to come here to visit, to live, and everything, because it's paradise, right? But we've got to make a less of an impact individually on that, and it goes into our backyards,
everywhere else.
And planting the right plants, using less fertilizers and
we're going to have to wrap it on that, but keep Palm Beach County beautiful. I can't think of a more important project, and we thank you for your passion and direction of the effort. And we'll be back with more in just a moment.
Thank you.
If you're interested in joining the Great American Cleanup, we have a list of where the events are being held. Just go to WPTV.com, click on the Protecting Paradise link. It will have the information and how you can be involved and help. And as always, thank you and yours for spending time with us on today's To The Point. If you'd like to send us your comments about today's broadcast, go to WPTV.com, click on the To The Point page, and we'll have a section to send us your views. Wishing you and yours a happy Easter. Enjoy your day.